וקבל ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו. השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשוב חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו, חדש ימינו כקדם. רוח קודשך אל תיקח ממנו, אל תשליכנו, אל תשליכנו, אל תשליכנו לעת זקנה, ככלות כוחנו, ככלות כוחנו, אל תעזבנו, אל תשליכנו מלפניך, ורוח קודשך אל תיקח ממנו, אל תשליכנו לעת זקנה, ככלות כוחנו, ככלות כוחנו, אל תעזבנו. שמע, שמע קולנו, שמע, שמע קולנו אדוני אלוהינו, חוס ורחם עלינו, וקבל ברחמים ורצון את תפילתנו.
Tell us about the song Narrow Bridge.
You told me about the whole world is a very narrow bridge, but the thing is to have no fear at all. And that spoke to me so specifically. I thought that is what we need to sing about right now, because we're all terrified, but we still have to keep on moving forward as, individuals and as a community. So when you said that to me, it really got me thinking. And then I thought, is there some sort of other quote, a poem, a something, a famous quote that somebody has said that is related in some way that I could maybe do an introduction or balance them out together? And I found a quote by Rabindranath Tagore, who was this wonderful, I think, turn-of-the-century poet. The quote goes, "Let me not pray to be sheltered from dangers, but to be fearless in facing them." And I thought, wow, that's so powerful. Let me not pray for the stilling of my pain, but for the heart to conquer it. Yeah. And I thought, well, if that doesn't go with the other thing, I don't know what does. And so I put them together, and you and I have our process. We talk about things. We go through every single word. You tell me the meaning of the whole sentence, and then you also tell me what every single word means and what the correct emphasis is, because I want to make sure when I am writing a melody for it that I'm not like emphasizing the Hebrew word for the or something non-important, and that I go to the important words, and those are the words that take flight and that make a good melody. And so we did that. And
it's even more than that. It's not just the essence of the text and the meaning of it, it's also the rhythm of the text.
That's the whole thing. If you can figure that out, then you can be a composer, right? If you can really find out what is the heart of the sentence.
It's not just the music for itself, it's the specific moment in the service, in the liturgical context that we're trying to amplify or to treat.
Knowing the services and finding something that's just going to just move right through in a calm and beautiful way, or in an uplifting way, or in a very personal way. These are the things that I try to find. And I was very excited about Narrow Bridge, though. I felt I wanted it to be stirring, and I wanted it to be hopeful in a way that would make people not have fear.
That spirituality comes to you through the music.
Always through the music. And it was my way into the synagogue. It's a universal thing. We all choose to worship in a different way. Music is one of those languages that is literally for every religion, every culture, every person. And that's that language that ties us all together. So I couldn't be more excited that something that I write would make people feel something good or move them in some way, and also bring us together, because we have that communal experience of singing together, which is the best.
Zina, what do you wish for yourself, for our community in a new year?
Well, I wish for healing. I think that's probably the first word that comes to mind.
Let me not pray to be sheltered from dangers, but to be fearless in facing them. Let me not beg for the stilling of my pain, but for the heart to conquer it. Kol העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד, גשר צר מאוד. כל העולם כולו גשר צר מאוד, והעיקר לא לפחד כלל. The whole world is a very narrow bridge, a very narrow bridge, a very narrow bridge. The whole world is a very narrow bridge, but the thing is to have no fear at all. The whole world is a very narrow bridge, a very narrow bridge, a very to be fearless.
Nikki, what is your earliest memory of the high holidays?
Some of my oldest traditions that I continue today was cooking and baking with my grandmother. My grandma Mary had all of her recipes. I still have her pots. We made gefilte fish together. I still do it every year in her memory. It brings a closeness and a connection, not just to her, but to everyone before her as well. So for me, it's probably cooking and baking and preparing for the holidays that meant as much as the time.
Are your kids, do they enjoy
The
this?
fish scares them a little bit, but they are definitely involved. They are much more involved in the challah baking, which is the other big one. And, especially as Rosh Hashanah was approaching, you always had to make it sweeter. And my grandmother would continue adding the sugar. I was like, it's too much sugar. And we used to always sort of laugh about the amount of sugar that had to go in on the Rosh Hashanah challah. So we continue, to bake. I bake with my kids, but certainly challah baking, and then the raisins and how to make it round, and do you twist it and make it round or just make it round?
How does the Jewish tradition inspire what you do professionally?
For me, the connection to the past and the continuing on is essential. And everything we've been taught in Judaism about tikkun olam, about reaching back to the community, giving back to the community. And I've been very fortunate in my career to be able to do that specifically and to make films to reach a broad audience about communities and about acceptance and tolerance. And that really all comes from the Jewish tradition I was taught. So it has a profound effect. I did a documentary on the Holocaust, which, I wanted to do before my grandmother passed away. And I'm working on my first Holocaust film now, because I think it's a really important time as we see what's happening in the world for those of us in certain businesses to be reaffirming all that we need to reaffirm.
In the heart of being Jewish, there are the Jewish high holidays. What do they mean to you?
They mean, it's crazy to say this, but they mean everything, the high holidays. It's a reset, it's a start, it's a marking, it's looking back and also knowing that you can move forward. The night of Kol Nidre, and it's a very important night in our family, and my father blesses each one of his children before we walk out of the house. And, I take my siblings, my parents' hands, and my mother always says, it's such a privilege that we are walking the street to synagogue. It's such a privilege that we have this freedom, and we should never forget it. And as you're walking to synagogue and you're seeing all the other Jews in your community walking to their shuls, it's really an incredibly powerful experience.
Nikki, what is your favorite prayer on the high holidays?
Each prayer reminds me sort of stories that my dad's whispering in my ear as, we're sitting there. And the story that has always affected me is in Untitled. My father explaining to me in the Orthodox synagogue that he grew up, old men weeping as that prayer was being sung. And especially the last time it's said, and it was, sort of your last moment. So there's something every time I hear that, because I think of my dad's words and just that feeling of that moment of judgment. And there's no doubt that last moment at Nila, when we're all together and you're exhausted, and those last moments for me are probably the height of all of it.
So last year in particular, during a pandemic, what was it like to experience high holidays in such a different way.
I was very blessed last Yom Kippur that I was with my parents, which many people weren't able to be. And we took an old Amazon box and we put white paper on it, and we had one of the kids' old stuffed Torahs. And so we put an ark in front, and we would have everybody go up, and we made a room that was synagogue.
So Nikki, what do you wish for in the new year for yourself, for your family, for the community, and for our country?
Well, I think the single word is peace. And I wish that for myself and my family, just, peaceful feelings, peaceful, a sense of peace. I wish it for the country. I certainly wish it for the world. It's so simple to say, can't we all just get along? But there are days I just want to say, can't we all just get along? It feels so easy and it's yet so hard, but I think a little kindness goes a lot of ways.
Hineni oni mimas nirosh v'nifchod mipachad yoesher tehilois Yisroel. Bosi la modulis chanein lefonecho alamecho Yisroel asher shlochuni. Ve'af al pi she'eini chedai והגון לכך, לכן אבקש ממך, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, ואלוהי יעקב, אדוני, Adonai, el rachum v'chanon, Elohei Yisroel, Shaddai, oy oy meven oy yera. אשר אנוכי הולך ויעמד לבקש רחמים עליי ועלי ויעל שואלכי. אל תפשיים בחטאותיי, ואל תחייבם בעוונותיי, כי חוטא ופושע אני, ואל יקולמו בפשעי, ואל יבושו בי, ואל יבושו בם. וקבל תפילוסי, כי ספילת זקן ורגיל, ופרקוניה, וזקן ומגודה וכל עוניים, בדס מיורב, עם הבריות. וסיגר בסוטון לבד יסתינני והנה דילגנו עליך אהבו ופשוענו תכסה תכסה באהבו יתגדל ויתקדש שמי בעלמא דברי רותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי לכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו אמן יש לרבה לברך יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי לקודשה פריחו לילה לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה גם אירן בעלמא
Hi, it's Cantor Ozzy Schwartz from New York.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear you. I happened to turn you on my iPad. What you've done with your community, it reminded me of the old days in the shul. We used to have the best time. That was our whole life. When we lived in Philadelphia, all the neighbors on Friday used to come to our driveway, and we would sing Zmiras.
How did people accept the fact that you sang together as a family?
Well, it was very hard because Papa gave up his finish. He could have been the greatest cantor in the world. He wanted to sing with his children. We used to say our family that prays together stays together.
You sang at Park Avenue Synagogue,
yes, we sang everywhere in New York. He said, I want New York to see my family, my children, and I want the children to see New York.
I want to sing something with you.
Well, go ahead, sing it with me. Go ahead.
Havein, havein, yakir li Ephraim, im yeled shashuim. What do you wish our community now this year for the new year?
I pray that this virus should go away and the Jewish people should come together. Park Avenue Synagogue should be how the world should be.
Thank you so much for speaking with us today. And I wish you a Shana Tova, a happy and healthy and sweet year.
Thank you. Ozzy, be well. I love you. I already love you like a child.
Haven, yakir li Ephraim, im yeled shashoim.
Ki midei dabri bo, zechor eskerenu.
Haven, yakir li Ephraim, im yeled shashoim. Ki midei dabri bo, zachor eskerenu. Haven, yakir li Ephraim, im yeled shashoim. Ki midei dabri bo, zachor eskerenu. Haven, yakir li Ephraim, im yeled shashoim. Ki midei dabri bo, zachor eskerenu. Alkeina hamumeya oilo. Alkeina hamumeya oilo. Rachem, Rachamenu,
is your earliest memory of the high holidays?
My father was a rabbi in Metuchen, New Jersey, at a conservative synagogue, Neve Shalom. Part of what I remember is just seeing him in his white robe, standing on the bima. It seemed like a larger than life service always for me. A really nice service where I really felt his role in the congregation in a way that's even more apparent than on any Shabbat. And the one other memory I have, Jimmy and I had the job of lifting the cantor up from the ground. And I was young enough that it seemed like the biggest responsibility that had been given to me.
Were there any special rituals or foods that you remember?
My father was usually so tired before and after we didn't do a lot of what other people were doing. You know, now the break fast on Yom Kippur has become a central, regular part of our life, and the family. We always do something. Meg always has something great ready. But growing up, it was my father was exhausted, and we either went to these friends to their house with some people, or we did nothing. But we always had a nice Rosh Hashanah lunch.
Does the Jewish tradition influence or inspire your professional life?
For me, a lot of Judaism is about debate. It's about taking certainties and unpacking them. And so when I became a professor, I remember I told my grandfather, who was also a conservative rabbi, that I was doing that. And he said, rabbi, professor, same thing. And I do think kind of the way I teach, the way I speak in public is influenced by that as well.
I was moved by a piece you wrote last year about the Torah in the family. So what inspired you to write that story about that object that you've seen all of a sudden on the live streaming?
So this is a Torah that was my grandfather's, and he was not only a rabbi in Ohio, but he was a chaplain in World War II. And when he went to the war, they gave each chaplain a small Torah to bring with them to do services with the soldiers, and everything from just weekly services to ceremonies and celebrations. It kind of got passed on. My father had it, and now it's at Park Avenue. And it's always a very cherished item for us. When all our kids had their bat and bar mitzvahs, they had that in front of them. But then we were watching live streaming, and it was moving because this was early in the pandemic when everyone was separate and we were just trying to figure out what this was all going to look like. And I thought about that and how the Torah appeared on my computer, and also how it was in a different kind of crisis when my grandfather had it, fighting against fascism. And it just made me think about the role of religion in difficult times, whether it's a pandemic or war, for Americans. As I wrote it, I contacted family members and did a lot of, historical learning of my own on my grandfather, who is a very special person, and really for me also a role model of what a rabbi can be in American society.
What do the holidays actually mean to you these days?
It's still like when I was a kid walking to shul. It really just marks a key moment in the year for me. And as we're always davening, I really keep thinking about what has happened, either personally or at a macro level, and start to imagine, what's to come. And I think for me, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are really about that, and they help you be introspective about how you've been with people and things you can do better.
So last year during a pandemic, celebrating a high holiday without that social component, how did that feel? And do you think we've learned something from it?
It was certainly hard, and I think everyone did a great job, and not just the leaders such as yourself, but even the congregants. Everyone bought in at a moment where it wasn't inevitable they would do so. And it was meaningful to have something so familiar and that's packed with so much history in our lives in this unprecedented, crazy moment we were living in. Just to hear, different prayers, and even to stand at certain points in the service when you're on a computer. There was something I found very moving.
Do you have any favorite prayer that really moves you on the high holidays?
For me, the most moving has always been the last shofar blowing in ceremony and prayer, after Yom Kippur. Every time it gets me. It really feels like the official closing of this period to me. And at a bigger level, you walk out after that shofar is blown, and I feel like, it's not simply about what you wish for and say, but you walk out of the shul and this is your time to do it. And when I hear the shofar, literally, it gets right into my bones. That one in particular.
What do you wish for in the new year for yourself, for your community, and for our country?
Well, I wish, everyone health, of course, that we kind of get through this, and the rough spots that will continue to happen, but that we are in a place that many of us has felt for much of the summer, where basic health concerns, at least from a pandemic, are not paramount. I really just hope for normality at this point. And obviously, as a political historian, I just hope that we have a different climate and that we can achieve a different climate in Washington, so that we're in problem solving mode rather than just kind of bitter fighting.
בטלין ומפותלין.
What is your earliest memory of the high holidays?
What I remember is my parents had the seats. They didn't go to shul very often, but when they did go, they were sitting in the front row. And I remember, what I remember was, this is probably sacrilegious. I apologize, Ozzy, but it was very hot. And I remember all the women still wearing their mink stoles. So I remember it was a sea of mink. My parents had this big old record player. And one of the things they had was it Richard Tucker? They had a record of him doing Jewish melodies. I hadn't thought about this till now. And he used to do, and one of them was Kol Nidre. It embodies Yom Kippur because the somberness of it and just all the historical memories, it brings you back again because your whole life, and the fact you also only hear it once a year makes it truly special. Obviously, I remember break fasts, and usually it would be at my aunt and uncle's, also in Valley Stream. A tremendous feast for break fast. Rosh Hashanah always would be a chicken dinner, and obviously would be the honey with apple. And that we continue now. In Washington, when we lived there for many years, Bill, who wrote the column for the New York Times, he had a big break fast every year. And it was essentially it was the intersection of Washington political life and Jewish life. It was a true Washington moment. You go, oh, I didn't know he was Jewish. I didn't know she was Jewish. And it was where everybody came together. And some people had fasted and some had not. And you could probably tell by their enthusiasm for the meal. But I just remember that every year. Again, it was a sense of belonging.
How do you think, Dr. Haas, that the Jewish tradition inspire your professional life?
One is obviously the whole idea of tikkun olam. If you're in my business and you think about the world, you think about foreign policy, you can get depressed pretty quickly. If you study a lot of history, it's often hard to be an optimist. Doesn't mean you're defeatist, but I do think you're a realist. And there is this requirement to go out and to try to improve things, to put out ideas, to put out thoughts that I think can make a difference.
Do you think that the high holidays specifically, do they have any specific meaning for this work or even just for you personally?
But the biggest thing about the high holidays for me is that it forces you to stop. It's almost like a punctuation point. And no matter what you're doing, you get off the merry-go-round. And whether it's on Rosh Hashanah, on Yom Kippur. So I remember in 1990, just to give you an idea, I was the Middle East advisor at the White House for President Bush the father. Well, then Yom Kippur came, and that was the first time I had not been in the office for a number of hours. But it was just a chance to go to synagogue. I remember a few years, I can't remember if it was earlier or later, when Sandy Berger and he was the national security advisor at the time. And there's a moment in the Al-Chet prayer, and you talk about all the sins and about what you call sins of commission, all the things you did wrong. And then there's that last one about a confused mind or confused heart. It's the one where essentially you don't act when you should. And I remember Sandy and I, may his memory be for a blessing, we looked at each other and we nodded because it was right after something where the United States could and should have done something and we didn't. Who shall live and who shall die? Who shall perish by flood? Who shall perish by fire? Who shall perish by disease, by plague? Wow, it's like the news. Here we are with floods, fires, and disease. There's a sense of immediacy to it that there, interestingly enough, wasn't for much of our lives. And maybe also as I get older, it's harder to escape thinking about, though it does actually get easier as you get older. It's one of the few good things about getting older. Fasting is easier today than it was 40 or 50 years ago.
So last year, the high holidays were very different. How was it for you?
The Shehechiyanu will take on additional meaning this year, just because we will have reached that point. In some ways, it made it, particularly on Friday nights, I probably, I participate as much now or more than I ever did. To be a member of the community at Park Avenue is a real gift. It's a bit of an oasis in this world we all live in.
What do you wish for in the new year for yourself, for the community, and for the country?
If you'd asked me that a couple of years ago, I would have given you a different answer. And what I think the last couple of years have shown is that what we used to take for granted, we can't. And whether it's, quite honestly, health or certain, in this country, certain aspects of American democracy. I used to get up in the morning and I'd worry about this or that international situation. I didn't really worry about some of the basics of our society. Now I do. So what I kind of yearn for, I guess you'd almost say, is a degree of normalcy, where we could again take some things for granted. Because what is more serious, 1968 or now? I went through 68. I was in high school. And yes, there was terrible times of anti-war protests, 2 big assassinations of Martin Luther King Jr., Robert Kennedy, violence in our cities. But what was not at stake was either the basics of our democracy or in some ways, some of the basics of the world. And I feel that this is actually a much more fraught moment. So you asked me what I wish for. It's not that I can wish these things away. What I can do, though, is wish for that we as a society can come together a bit so we can potentially deal with these challenges.
ויבוא שבתנו מבוקר ויראה רינוננו עד ערב יעלה קולנו מערב ויבוא צדקתנו מבוקר ויראה פדיוננו עד ערב יעלנו ינו מערב ויבוא סליחתנו מבוקר ויראה נקתנו עד ערב יעלה מנוסנו מערב ויבוא למענו מבוקר ויראה כיפורנו עד ערב יעלה ישענו מערב ויבוא טהורנו מבוקר ויראה חינוננו עד ערב יעלה זיכרוננו מערב ויבוא ויהודנו מבוקר ויראה הדרתנו עד ערב יעלה דופקנו מערב ויבוא גילנו מבוקר ויראה בקשתנו עד ערב יעלה נקתנו מערב ויבוא אליך מבוקר ויראה אלינו עד ערב.
Tell me, what is your earliest memory of the high holidays?
Well, I mean, there is no earliest memory because my father was a cantor in a congregation in South Orange, New Jersey. So all I knew from the high holidays between birth and 18 years old was my dad singing, my dad's voice. I just remember also the awe and the majesty, all the preparation that he was doing. It was because he cared so much about it, right? He cared so much about the community. He cared so deeply about making sure that everyone in the congregation was having that spiritual experience.
I'm sure there was a special way that your father and mother wished you a Shana Tova. What do you remember from that?
From my mother's perspective, it was in the cooking and it was in the preparation and the dinner. My mother's family is from Haiti. So a lot of the meals and the dishes that I grew up with were actually Haitian or Sephardic dishes that were kind of brought in. So there's dishes like kibe, which was these little kind of little cigars and more of an Egyptian dish. So there's a lot of foods that wouldn't translate as Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur foods, but those were my favorite growing up.
I bet the high holidays play a specific role in your year in general, and I hear it in your music, right? Like the song Amen, Amen, that it's almost like our anthem for the high holidays. You captured something there. What is it that you feel on the high holidays that led you to write that magnificent song?
It's awe, it's majesty, it's joy, it's uplift, it's renewal, it's refreshing, it's a call to wake up. It's all of those things. It is a joy that these melodies are being sung. Actually, with that song specifically, you added a part on your recording that now I sing all the time. You sang, whoa, amen. So you added that little riff, and now I love it so much. I sing it all the time. I love putting something out into the world, but then I also love how people own it and they turn it into their own piece and let congregations sing things with their full voice.
And on the high holidays, we have that sound of the shofar. That call, it's something very unique, very special, and so much that it inspired you. I remember last year that you called me that you wanted to write a song about the shofar that we premiered last year during a pandemic. So what moved you about that sound of the shofar to create a melody for it?
Yeah, so the melody, yeah, that like the sound of the melody was like kind of like a trumpet, right? It's a sound of it's not a shofar, but a sound of a trumpet moving around and a horn blast. What a cool concept that we had from 3,000 years ago, that people would stand on the top of a mountain and blow this horn, and then that would resonate and reverberate out, and that people would hear that call and know to draw close. I mean, what a beautiful concept that we have in our tradition. And then when we hear it now, it echoes through our DNA. My father heard that shofar. My grandfather heard that shofar. My great-grandfather heard that shofar.
It's beautiful. So Noah, what do you wish for in the new year for yourself, for your community, and for our nation?
For the nation, I pray that we heal, that we learn to listen, that we can find each other again. And we have to remember that people are people. There's a lot of love still there, and we need to be able to see each other and speak to each other and connect with each other. So that's my hope and prayer for the nation. For the community, I hope that we learn to dive in, that we learn to step more firmly into ourselves and into our practices and into our rituals that keep us connected to one another. And for myself, I pray that I stay consistent, I stay persistent, I stay insistent on my being the best version of myself.
Arise and open up your eyes. It's time to wake up from your sleep and hear the cries. Arise and let your light shine. Now is the time to hear the call and start to rise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech קול שופר, לשמוע קול שופר, לשמוע קול שופר, לשמוע קול שופר. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שהחיינו וקיימנו והגיענו לזמן הזה. Arise and open up your eyes. It's time to wake up from your sleep and hear the cries. Arise and let your light shine and start to rise.
Hi, Siona. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
How did you find out about Park Avenue Synagogue?
It's one of the silver linings to COVID. So for COVID, my synagogue did not stream services. So I searched on the web, found Park Avenue. I fell in love with the service and I'm devoted. I'm grateful to y'all.
Tell me about your relationship with your grandfather, the great cantor Moshe Kosevitsky.
My relationship was wonderful. There's a photograph of me in his arms and both our mouths are wide open. Here in New York, I know him to be the cantor at Temple Bethel on 49th Street in Borough Park. They were out in the street listening to him. And people came from their shuls in order to hear Papa. And every Shabbos, during announcements just before the Adon Olam, I learned to, I don't know how it started, leave my father's seat and run up on stage and sit in my grandpa's lap. I remember when he already had cancer. It was a few months before his death, and he had just produced his last record album. It was the Mogen Avot, and it was still in proof form. It hadn't been put out there yet. He drew me into his study, which was also where he always practiced. He put on the record and started singing. I had a private performance of the Mogen Avot, and it was maybe his last time. I'll never forget it. So, Cantor Azi, when you started singing it several months ago, and I felt it, oh my God, you did his style. You did his way. There is no way I can communicate to you what you did for me. I'm grateful. Thank you for keeping his legacy alive.
רחמון אודיוני, רחמון אודיוני, להניע, להניע.
Tell me, what do you remember about the high holidays growing up?
I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish family, and my mother was a concert violinist. I play on her violin now. So I grew up in this very musical family, and then also we were going to shul on Shabbat and being observant of the Sabbath, and the services are very different. No music on Shabbat, of course. But it was beautiful nonetheless, because we always had the cantors. The singing is just so gorgeous. It's like this crying to God. It has so much meaning to me.
So Gabi, a few years fast forward from the way you grew up, you get a call from our music director, David Enlow, to be the concert master of an orchestra on Kol Nidre. You sit in the pews of the congregation, you're wearing a mask, and you're leading an orchestra in Avinu Malkeinu.
I mean, it was just such an elevated, special moment for all of us, to be able to do such a very unique thing during the pandemic. It was kind of like out of this universe. I would never in a million years imagine doing something like that. And because of the social distancing, the brass was in the second floor, and you heard the oboe there and the flute there, and the violins were all spread out. So it was a challenge to lead an orchestra that way, but it was also really interesting because it pushed all of us to open our ears much more in such a more intense way than we usually do.
So Gabi, what do you wish for in a new year? And what do you wish our community?
I wish that we are just going to open up, and we're going to be able to have opportunities to be with the community and be surrounded with other people. It's important for human connection.
Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim, Aseh imanu, Tzedaka v'chesed, Aseh iman, Tzedaka v'chesed, V'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim, Aseh imanu, Tzedaka v'chesed, Aseh iman, tzedaka v'chesed, v'hoshienu. Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Choneinu Vaneinu, Ki ein banu masim, Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed, Aseh iman, tzedaka v'chesed, v'hoshienu. Aseh imanu, tzedaka v'chesed, Aseh iman, tzedaka v'chesed,
Joseph, what do you wish for in the new year for your community, for our nation?
I wish for people to talk with each other. I wish for this pandemic to be absolutely done because it's killing me, you know, just in terms of working with fellow musicians. I want the children in this synagogue to feel that they can come back and that we can sing together. That includes the adults. I want new things to happen. I want learning.
Tekiah Gedolah.
Shana Tova.